Hi, this is Leanne Lankford with TrainingPros. I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar on socializing the virtual classroom. I'd like to move forward to talk about how we can participate. Okay, so we have right now close to 100 folks on the webinar and more joining every second. So for that reason, you're muted. We don't want a lot of people making a lot of noise in the background. So we do have enabled for you questions. As you can see here, there's a question area where you can send us questions during the webinar, and we will answer them behind the scenes. Both myself and Kim Moran, who's from Evoke Learning, will be answering questions in the chat area and sending questions to our facilitator. You can also raise your hands in answer to questions if you're asked, and there's a little small hand button right there on the left. Okay. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about TrainingPros. Thanks. So we do have a hashtag if you would like to talk on Twitter about this, hashtag virtual class. My name is Leanne Lankford. I'm an instructional designer, and I'm a relationship manager with TrainingPros. TrainingPros is a learning and development staffing company that specializes in working closely with training and development departments of large organizations to identify, attract, and onboard contract professionals for very specific and specialized training and development needs. If you're a contract professional and you're interested in being considered for work with our clients, please go to our website listed there and click on the Join Our Team button, and one of our relationship managers will meet with you to determine what would be a good project for you. Okay, next I'd like to talk just a little more about why TrainingPros is a little different. So the difference we provide from other L&D staffing companies is, number one, our talent pool. Our consultants will come to you with a balance of academic credentials, corporate and client experience, and they will add immediate value to your team. Our pre-screened consultants, they bring valuable expertise to your project, and in most cases, the consultant will have worked with TrainingPros on a prior project, so we will be able to give you prior feedback on them. The second difference is our relationship managers. Each one of us is an industry expert. Your relationship manager will offer end-to-end relationship. In other words, we work with you from helping determine what you need all the way through placing the consultant with you and monitoring the project all the way to the end. And so it makes it easy to work with us and a simplified process. The last step, the last part that makes us a little different is our onboarding process. We have a structured onboarding and debriefing process designed to get your consultant up and running quickly and to ensure that the consultant can fit in with your team quickly. These three elements tie together to create a simple and effective learning and development staffing experience for your company. Now I'd like to introduce my guests here from Evoke Learning. We have 3 people from Evoke Learning are going to be treating us to a virtual classroom webinar. So we have Kim Moran, who is going to be helping me in the background with answering questions. Laura Pierce, who you can see here, she's a principal at Evoke. And then Vernon Roberts, who's also a principal at Evoke, and he's going to be our main facilitator. So Vernon, take it away.
Thank you so much, Leanne, and welcome everyone to Socializing the Virtual Classroom. My name is Vernon Roberts, and you see my picture right there on the top. And Laura Pierce, one of our partners, is right there on the bottom. We are partners at Evoke, and what we help companies do is thrive in face-to-face and virtual environments. And simply what we do is we help people make virtual better. And let me tell you what that means. It's if you manage a global team, how do you do the virtual there to manage the global team? If you're making a presentation, how do you make better presentations virtually? And also if you're an instructor, how do you engage participants in the classroom better? That's really what Evoke focuses on. So that's why we thought that it was really important to do this webinar on socializing the virtual classroom. More and more, and you guys have seen this, companies are migrating from this face-to-face to this virtual environment for a number of reasons. to not have their Salesforce taken off the line for a long period of time, but also to cut expenses. And those are the reasons. But there are a lot of challenges in moving from the face-to-face to the virtual environment. When we think about this, there's so many things out there that you need to be aware of when this happens. There's this thing we call a webinar, and what we're doing today, and we've heard that. What is a webinar? There's so many terms out there that you've heard. There's this asynchronous learning. There's synchronous learning. There's virtual workshops. There's e-learnings. There's video on demand. There's webcasts. There's MOOCs. And it's like, what is all this? So what we're going to do today is have a definition for where we're going to focus our time and kind of clean this up. But one thing we know is it's all virtual. That's the key. It's all virtual. But there are a number of challenges that come with this all virtual environment. And one of them is engagement of the participants on the other end. That is one of the things that it's a real challenge. And so you're going to find us talking about that today. And also, as I speak today, be mindful. But I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit and talk about some of the things that I'm doing to make some connection with you. So if you take a look here, one of the challenges with virtual was connection. And there was a study done on these massive online open courses called MOOCs. Now what MOOCs are these open courses that Harvard and Yale put out several years ago, and they gave them free. And what they found out was that the completion rate of these courses lagged far behind those of their traditional classes. I'm like, well, what was up with that? Why did that happen? So they polled the students, and the students said, well, you know, there was a lack of a human connection, and it felt like it was really mechanical. And therefore, they had no connection to what was going on there, and they felt like they were kind of in the dark, and they didn't feel like they had any kind of commitment to the class. So they never gave their all, and subsequently didn't finish. So that's one of the main things we're going to talk about, and that's why I think that socializing in the virtual classroom is key. One of the things we did before this webinar was that we reached out to you, and many of you, and thank you for doing this, you filled out the survey ahead of time. And so we brought in exactly what you said to us, and we asked you, what is your biggest challenge in the virtual classroom? And take a look at that big slice of the pie in the middle there. 51% of you said keeping people engaged. 51%. And if we can get that slide back, 51% of you said keeping people engaged was the biggest issue. That is not unusual. And that generally happens, and what we found in a lot of virtual training classes, and exactly what was happening in those MOOCs, those massive online free classes that were being offered by Harvard and Yale, they couldn't keep them engaged. So let me ask you this question. And in a moment, we're going to put up a poll for you. And here's the question. Which of the key phrases below describe your thoughts when you hear webinar? So Leanne, why don't you go ahead and put the poll up. And we're going to reach out to you guys and give you a moment to think about this question and go ahead and give us your thoughts. When you're done, go ahead and hit submit.
Lots of answers coming in. Okay, we've got about 86% of you have voted. I'm going to go ahead and close it and show everybody the results.
Excellent, thank you. Wow, and it looks like you guys have said yes, it's all those things. So 62 of you said presenting information. And what does that mean, presenting information? It's one way. Information going one way. The other one is low interactivity, 54%, and large number of people. So it is all those things. And guys, that's exactly what we battle in a webinar. We battle it's just presenting information. And you see there, it doesn't say taking in or how do we think about it, it says presenting. Also, we talk about where it says one-way communication. So that's the biggest challenge in interaction. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So as we move from this whole webinar piece, we want to, and you can close that up for us.
It's closed now. You just need to show your screen again.
Gotcha. We're getting there. Having a little bit of challenge here. Okay. All right. So when we think about the webinar piece, if we take a look on the right here, it says a webinar. It's just what you guys said. It's greater than 26 people, could be up to 1,000. It's muted for all participants. And like you said, it's mostly one-way communication. And then also, it's, when we say cognitive, it's really they're processing the information. It doesn't necessarily mean they understand it, but they're just taking information in. And clearly that's what we're doing here today. Now on the left-hand side is what we're going to be discussing. We're going to be discussing what we call at Evoke as the virtual classroom, which is up to only 25 participants. And we feel like that is the magic number that enables us to reach out and touch each of the participants, ask them questions, connect with them. And you see if you fall right under that on the left-hand side is open for all, is the audio. So we can hear them, they can hear us, and we don't mute it. Because when you mute it, it gives participants a chance to just disengage and multitask. So that gives us that two-way conversation, as it says. And also, it's really more personal that way. It's really a convergence on what does this really mean? Why does it matter? What's the impact of that? Where we lose that really in the virtual, in the webinar, with a large group of people are always muted. So here's the point here. And let's make sure that we can get this slide going here because I don't think you guys are seeing it. Hold on for a second. The main thing is to think about what's important here and which would be better for us for a particular situation. Is it a webinar or is it a virtual classroom? So what you want to do is make sure that your people are going to come with you. You're going on this journey. And just think about it this way. If you were driving down the street and you stopped the car and said, "Come with me," you say, "You're crazy. What's wrong with you?" But you have to give them a compelling reason. Or in this way, think of it as a bus. You're making stops, and you're giving people a compelling reason to come with you. And that's what happens in this virtual room, especially in a small classroom. You've got to make them want to come with you in this environment. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about 5 essential practices that we found out, that we've discovered in all our work that will help socialize the virtual classroom and really connect with participants. And if you can use these 5 practices, the benefit to you would you be able to walk away with a better way and a plan to engage participants in your classrooms. So 5 practices. We thought there were a number of common challenges. And the first common challenge that we heard from our audiences was this sense of isolation. And that's exactly what you heard when I talked about the Harvard-Yale example of MOOCs. Participants felt like they were out there all alone and they were on the other end of this computer and they really didn't have any connection to the class. So take a look at this quote. I'm going to give you a second to read that. And the key here from this quarterly magazine is that they need to become aware themselves as a community so they don't feel isolated, like they're sitting in their office behind this computer, but there are other folks, like there's over 100 of you out there right now listening to me. And just know that you can connect with me. You did a poll. You're going to be typing in the question box and asking questions. I'm even going to ask you to type in the box to make some statements for yourselves, the things you want to let us know. So what we believe at Evoke, in order to combat this sense of isolation, is that the main thing is that you need to treat your participants as guests. Think of it as a party. You are hosting a party. And what do you do when you come to a party? Well, people knock on the door and you let them in. And from the time they walk in, you are connecting with them. You're introducing them to other people. All things that are very critical to your participants. So letting them know they're there and that they matter. Use their name, which is important. And that's why we chose the magic number of 25 or less. Use their name. You can look up in that participant box, find who they are. Say, hey, Elizabeth, hey, Joe, hey, Tom. Tell me about your experience. What do you think about that? What was the impact of that? Make sure they are connected. Let me ask you this question, and I'm going to throw this out to you. What happens, what message am I sending when I call people by name in a small virtual classroom? And what I'm going to give you right now is the opportunity is to just type your answer in that question box. Go ahead and type your answer in the question box. And the question is, what are you doing and what message are you sending by using names of participants often in a small classroom and virtual? Go ahead, type your response. I'll give you 30 seconds to do that.
Vernon, it's Laura here, getting a lot of great answers from that. You know, Glenda's saying personalizing. Carol says it personalizes it. Seeing a lot of that. Laura is saying keeping their attention. You know, you're all absolutely right on the money. Is connecting. Barbara is talking about connecting with different people and parts of the classroom. And Ed, I love what you say, makes me feel included. Vernon, I think just we're seeing some great understanding of why that is so important to be able to personalize it. And I'm seeing a lot of them just feeling really included.
And I think that is the key, making them feel included. And many of you on this call, from looking at when you guys did the survey, are at least classroom instructors, and many of you have done virtual, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly. And you do that in the classroom. That's a key in the classroom. And the challenge that we've seen with hundreds of virtual instructors is that they fail to bring their skills from the face-to-face to the virtual. And that's what we're going to ask you to do. Just because it's technology, don't forget all the skills you have in the face-to-face classroom. Bring them along. Make them feel included, like all of you said. And thank you for participating there. And then I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit and say, this is how we communicate in the smaller classroom, or even a larger one, is that we ask you to type in chat or send us a message so we know. And then Laura used your names just now to connect and show you that we did hear what you said. And we're just not a recording on the other end of here. The point is to make your participants feel like they're shoulder to shoulder with you in a conference room. That is the actual key. That is what you're looking for here. The other aspect of this is to, when you talk about participants, make them feel like you know where they are. So we do a lot of international programs. And last week I had somebody in Australia, somebody in Beijing, somebody in India, and it's really important to say to them, hey, Mike in Australia, thank you. I know it's 11 p.m. for you. I really appreciate it. Let them know, connect, and then they feel heard and honored at that point. So, and you can even talk about some things. How's the weather down there? What's going on? All sorts of things. So be mindful of that, but that means you have to write it down. Know where your participants are. Connect with them. And there's a time zone impact. The other hint I'll give here is that if they're in different time zones, don't give it away and don't be disrespectful when saying, because I'm on the East Coast right now in the U.S. If I say, oh, we're going to start back up at noon, that's kind of disrespectful to everyone. So I would say, we're going to start back up at the top of the hour. Now, if there are a couple countries, I'll give India as one of them, that they're not on the same, they're on they're half an hour difference from everybody else. And there's several countries like that. So you might have to say, we're going to start at the top of the hour, and those in India, we're gonna start you at the bottom of the hour, or 10 minutes to the bottom of the hour, whatever that is. So you're really clear on that. But this is just really connecting with them and letting them know that you care. The main thing here is what you're doing is you're making meaningful connections with them. Meaningful connections, which is the most important thing. So that's the first of the essential tools, is make meaningful connections. The second one is, how many of you, here's what I want you to do. Raise your hand if you've ever been to a meeting or a class and you're like, oh my gosh, why is this important? Why do we even care? Why is this important? Why do we care? Raise your hand if you've ever done that, if you've ever been to a meeting like that. Go ahead and take a moment to do that.
Lots of raised hands out there.
I'm sure there are, and I can really appreciate that, and thank you guys for raising your hands. And guys, that's another way I've connected. I've asked you to do something. Always ask your participants to do something every 3 minutes. Nobody wants to hear you talking. And this goes back to the point about making sure that you're making meaningful connections here. Now, sometimes you'll have some difficulties, and right now we're having a few difficulties with slides, but you can't let those deter you. You've got to keep moving forward. And I'm sure that many of you would probably say that, those of you who have taught virtually, that, and we probably say about 10% of the time things go wrong. So just learn to expect that. 10% of the time things might go wrong in the virtual room. And I always expect something to go wrong, so I'm always prepared to make corrections. So thank you for raising your hands. It's crazy out there when you think you haven't learned anything or you don't know why you're there. So that's why it's important for you to tell the participants what your final destination is. Let them know where you're headed. It's like your GPS. It needs to know where you are and then where you're going to give instructions. Nobody wants to be left out in the cold. They want to know where they're headed. And you know, it's all about what's in it for me, and especially virtually when there's so many other distractions that you're competing with, their email and everything else. So make sure in the first 2 minutes, now hear me clearly, in the first 2 minutes you got to let them know the final destination. And the point here is it's all about this inclusion again. How am I being included? How do I fit so I don't feel disconnected? So you're going to have to craft an opening that does that. So again, we're going to go back out to you guys. And I want you to be the judge here. In a moment, I'm going to put up a slide with 2 openings on it, one on the left and one on the right. I'm going to give you some time to read those openings. And then Leanne is going to put up a poll. And I want you in the poll to give me what you think about those openings based on, remember which one was number 1 and remember which one was number 2. All right? So again, I'm going to put up 2 things and you're going to read them and then tell me which one was more effective. Ready? Here we go. Okay, you've read opening number 1 and opening number 2. Leanne, you want to go ahead and put that poll up and let's see
The poll is open.
what they say.
Okay, votes are starting to come in. We have over half have voted. Keep going. Okay, we seem to have slowed down at 78%, so I'm going to, oh, whoops, still going.
That's what happens when you have hundreds of people.
I know. So I'm going to close the poll now and let everybody see the results.
Well, there's a clear one there. Number 2, told me why first before the what. And you guys hit right on it. It is so important for us to tell the why first before the what. The second one, opening number 1, was more compelling. Not many of you felt that way. And even more descriptive. It was more descriptive, but the key here is the why before the what. And a lot of times we have the tendency to say the what we want them to do before the why. And we all know as humans, you always want to know why. And I have 3-year-old grandchildren. You know they're approaching that age of when you ask them something, they say, why? Why are we doing that? Why? Same thing even in adult learning. Adults want to understand the why. So it's important that you craft a statement that lets them know the why before the what. So critical, and that's what we find that's critical, especially in the virtual classroom. Leanne, thank you for that. We can put that down, but thank you. 64%. 64% of you did that. All right. So the point here is share the roadmap with them. Let them know where we're headed, what's coming, what's so important, and why they should care about it in the first 2 minutes. And that's going to be challenging, but you need to do it succinctly. The third thing that we felt that was a challenge in the virtual classroom was people that talk too much, especially in a small virtual classroom. If you're an instructor that likes to wax poetic and talk a lot and doesn't like to give up the mantle of conversation and let their participants involved, you're going to be in trouble in the virtual room. You've got to be able to ask questions and connect with your participants. You've also got to be able to eliminate the amount of words that you're using. And what I mean here is to, instead of giving them a wall of words, and this is what it'll sound like if you're talking incessantly, and don't pause and give them a chance to do anything like chat or do anything. This is what you sound like in a virtual classroom. But what we want you to sound like is this. And the main thing for any good speaker or presenter is that we want you to choose your words or be deliberate with your word choices. So important here, so important. That requires that you pause, take your time, speak deliberately, but not lose your energy here. We worked with an exec once in one of our workshops, in a workshop, and this is a quote that he said, more words are an indication of more thought, they're an indication of less thought. And here's what this reminds me of. If you've ever been in a university or college and taken a blue book exam or a composition book exam where you had to have essays, and just think about what you did, what did you do, and type this in the question box. Type this in the question box. What did you do when you didn't know the answer? What did you do? Go ahead and type in the question box. This is just a quick one. What did you do when you didn't know the answer?
Vernon, I love these answers. Carol says, added lots of fluff. Joseph said, raised my hand. Glenda, the best answer yet. Froze right there in the moment. I've been there and felt that way. Nancy, I love what you said, made something up. Ed, if I can't dazzle them, that was good. Excellent responses.
We know the rest of that one.
Yeah, exactly. Great responses, sort of a general trend. You know, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, and for me, I would write everything I knew to be true. It's kind of the same thing. If we can't dazzle them, then ... right? That's the key here. And you might appear that you don't know what's going on if you are continuing just to chat, just to talk, and to, like I like to say, like wax poetic. So it's really important that you are deliberate with your word choices. So important. So the point here is think fast and be fluent. And what I'm saying here is not be fast or talk fast. I'm saying think fast and then be able to quickly articulate what you want to say in a short period of time. That's the key. That's the magic of the virtual room. Less actually means more, because that leaves more room for your participants to speak. All right, so far we have make meaningful connections, share the roadmap, think fast, and be fluent. Number 4, sometimes there's so many things going on in the virtual room as an instructor that you might lose sight of the ball. You might forget because you're so worried about the content. All that's on your mind is, I want to get through this, and I want to just say what I want to say, and you forget about all those flesh and blood humans on the other side that really need what you're saying and want to connect with it. So here's the thing: when we're talking about this whole losing sight of the ball, I'm going to come to you again, and here is another question for all of you. All right, here's the question: what does a virtual instructor need to keep aware of in the virtual room? Go ahead and check which ones you think are important. All the things a virtual instructor needs to be aware of in the virtual room.
Okay, the votes are coming in. Okay, we're up to about 80% of you have voted. Still coming.
Wow, still coming.
I know. Okay,
so
I'm going to go ahead and close it now and share the results.
Well, I'll just say, and let me pull back the curtain a little bit, 80% of you, more than 80% of you responded. So we're engaging, we're doing something, you're involved in the presentation. Pulling the curtain back there. All right, so let's take a look at this. It was a trick question, right? All of the above, basically, right? I'm sure you read all those and you're like, oh, all of the above. Right. If someone's audio disappears, well, if you have a producer, you can make sure that producer private chats that person if you're able to do that in your environment. And that's key. Or if there's a message typed in chat, you've got to be aware of it. If you aren't aware of it, and if you know how, I'm not going to ask you to type anything, but you know how you feel if you raise your hand and if you feel ignored. Or if you click the raised hand button or type something and you feel ignored, same thing. Or if you ask a question and there's crickets out there. So you have to manage all those things, and that's why we had that picture of the guy juggling. That's exactly what it is. So we want to make sure that you do, and Leanne, you can drop that poll, thank you. Just remember 95%, it's all of the above, those things that have to happen. All those things have to happen. So, and this is WebEx, by the way, if you look at this picture, but if you look on the left, you're looking at a lot of things while you're presenting. You're looking at your thumbnails, you're looking at your slides in the center, top right, you're looking at your participant list, bottom right, you're looking at your chat box, all those things. Oh, you're looking at your notes. And by the way, I didn't even mention if you had a webcam. We're not even going to go there right now. But all those things you have to be attentive to. And that's why I think it's really important for you to sit back, be calm, and take it on. Take it on, have a rhythm to your motions. I'm looking at my chat box, I'm looking at the slides, I'm looking at my thumbnails, I'm looking at for raised hands, all those things. So important. Here's the next thing that we think is so critical, is to listen and take notes. If I'm creating conversation, say if I ask him a question or Mary a question, and Mary says something insightful, I want to write it down really quickly. Make sort of crib notes. And then later on I can go back and say, Mary, earlier on you said, and that was important because. And if I do that, you know, Mary now feels included. And some of you may say, well, God, you need to take notes while I'm doing all these things. Great instructors do that. And I can tell you, after a number of tries and you're feeling comfortable with the technology, especially if you have a producer, you can do all of these things. These are all doable things. So taking notes, listening to what they say. All right, so that's number 4. The bottom line here, as we see, is be a seamless multitasker. So now, we've talked about making meaningful connections, really using their names, connecting with them. We said share the roadmap. Tell them where you're going. Tell them the why before the what in the first 2 minutes. Think fast and be fluent. Be able to quickly articulate what you want to say using good word choices. Don't add a lot of fluff in your words. No ahs and ums, and hopefully you haven't heard me say any ahs and ums today. The last one is be a seamless multitasker. Take notes. Give the wide-angle view of your desk, your whole desk, where your screen is, your notes, participant lists, etc. The final thing that we're going to chat about today is, and you can't bore them. And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but you know you've been on webinars that have done this, or even classes where the instructor has just talked and not engaged you, the participant, in any way. So what I want you to do is go ahead and type in the question box like you always have been doing. You know the drill. What are some creative ways that you've used to engage folks in the classroom if you've taught this before? If you've taught virtual, some of you haven't, but the ones who have taught virtual, what are some of the ways? And I want to hear some things, and I know Laura and Kim are going to read out some things that you guys typed there. So I'm going to keep quiet for 30 seconds and let you guys answer this question.
Vernon, I know people are still typing in. There's just some great things coming in. I'm hearing, Mike is talking about whiteboards and breakout. Laura's brought up, some Captivate simulations that you can use and show. Regina calling on participants to get their feedback. Great examples, and being able to find out Bradley about using names and location. Krima says, ask him about the weather. It's always good to make that great rapport. Bring up a map. Bring up a map, Brett. This is a methodology we use a lot with virtual teaming, is bring up a map and have them show where they live or where they're calling from. Rachel and several other people have said annotation tools, and I can't stress enough that that's a very important issue. And Catherine had brought up a question, Vernon, and I thought this would be a good place to talk about is, practicing. What should we do about that? Get in your environment and practice and test all these tools. That's going to be crucial. You don't want the technology to be the focus and get in the way, and practice will really help you. Set up your environment, your studio, in a way that's going to be effective, and that's something we work with clients to help them do. Great answers in technical training, Shirley. And I think the last point here is really turn over the mouse control. Get participants to navigate and be engaged. Great feedback, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for participating. Laura, thank you for pulling that all together. And as Laura and Kim can probably tell you, I am a crazy person with the annotation tools. I love to annotate while speaking. And we had a little technical malfunction, so it's killing me right now that I can't annotate. But just be assured that I use my highlighter, I use all the annotation tools when I'm presenting in the virtual classroom. So thank you for all those things. And it's all because you have to keep that engagement going, because we all, you lose 70% of your ability to communicate between your body language and seeing their body language and your facial expressions, and all you have is your voice. And what many people are afraid of is 94% of folks from a Gartner study when using virtual 94% said they were afraid of losing these visual cues. I can't see what the participant's doing. And like you all said earlier, you said you wanted to get engagement. So these are really come hand in hand. So the remedy to that we found is this. Emphasis on what you're saying. So number one, like I said earlier, I'm going to jump back for a second when I said be deliberate about your word choices, and then use vocal variety. So enunciate and punctuate your words with energy. Energy is the key. It's all about energy and being present. Hearing what they've said, have energy around it. Now, let me give an example. I'm glad everyone came to the webinar today. It's really important for us to use vocal variety when we speak. I'm happy that everyone came here, and if you notice on the last slide, 94% of you are worried about visual cues. Really quickly, go ahead and type in chat. If I talk like that, what would you be doing right now? Go ahead and type in chat. Type in the question box. I'm so used to saying chat, sorry about that. Type in the question box. If I talk like that this whole session, what would you have been doing?
I think, Vernon, there's a general trend. Boring, and they're sleeping, or they're doing email. Oh, and I love it. Carol, you're shopping on Amazon. You're a woman after my own heart. Absolutely.
Buy me something, please. And I hope, I hope you have Prime, by the way. Okay. So, yes, they'll be doing everything else. So it's your job as instructor. When Leanne said to me, Vernon, take it away, I have to be on my game and have energy when I speak. Also, in that small group of participants, under 25, I'm asking questions. Now I'm asking you questions, but they're not as thought-provoking because this is more of a one-way conversation, but you are telling us your thoughts. And Kim and Laura so graciously pull those out and summarize those for us. But in the virtual classroom, you can take the time to really ask those thought-provoking questions. We like to call them even second-level questions. So if someone asks something, go back and say, so Mary, that's interesting you mentioned that. What's the impact of that on customers? Or how would you see that playing out in another situation? Or if you could change the variables there, what would you do? Really getting into their heads and seeing how they're processing what you're talking about. And that's that whole thing of getting engagement. Are they engaged? Do they understand what I'm teaching? Because remember, as I said earlier, the fallacy about communication is the thought that it's happened. And just because as an instructor that you're talking doesn't mean that anybody's listening. The key is to get them to respond to what you're saying and have a conversation. So thought-provoking questions are key. And again, that whole not boring but energy in your voice. And remember to add to that energy that deliberate word choices that we spoke about earlier. All right, so to recap, Laura, you said you have a question that's come in. Do you want to answer that? Or talk about that?
I do. It actually came in earlier, Vernon. And Don, thank you for bringing this up. And Don had raised the issue of what do we do in corporate environments where headsets aren't readily available? And I think there's a couple of things folks to think about. Is one, there's some instructional design elements in this. If I remember early on, I did in about 2004, did a transition of a program in which we wanted people to engage, be able to hear sound, talk, and we forgot that none of them had speakers or microphones on their laptops in their offices. So that's a bit of a challenge. From a instructor standpoint, if you can be on a headset, that's going to be, if they have good, clear language from you, that's going to be critical. If you're trying to get interaction from teams, being on a speakerphone is tough, but that would be preferable. Voice over IP is going to limit you a little bit in that, sometimes a dial-in number. But I do think headsets as instructors is a must-have tool. Your voice, and several of you have said that, is your key tool, and you want to make sure you're clear and crisp.
I can't even imagine. Headsets are the key, and I know it might be difficult for some, and some of the folks that have come to our our certification class didn't have them, so we just really recommend that you have headsets. And then, Laura, and I don't know if you said this, but always be on a landline generally if you're teaching a class at an institution. And because there's such variability in VoIP, in speaking over the web, that you don't want to chance that when money's on the line. That's really the key. So I hope that answered your question. Thank you for that question. But that's a great point because we're going to go to questions in a second. So get ready with your questions. We're right on time here. So let's recap. Feeling of isolation. Make meaningful connections. Treat them as guests. Use their names. Honor where they are located. Understand their time zone. Number 2, share the roadmap. Share the why before the what. Humans are like that. We're inquisitive. We want to know. Think fast and be fluent. Not a wall of words here, remember. Be deliberate about your word choices. Number 4, juggle those balls, seamless multitasker. Take notes, advance the slides, look at the question in the question box, or engage your producer to help you do so. And number 5, use energy and engagement. That energy in your voice. You don't want to be boring. This has to be exciting as it needs to be. I had a facilitator say to me once, Vernon, this stuff is boring. I can't make it exciting. And my statement is, if you have to put yourself in the participant's shoes, what are they going to do with the information that you're giving them? You have to be excited about being able to help them with whatever they're doing. So be excited that you're providing them with information that they need. So those 5 are the ones, and it's all about you. It's all about you really providing that energy and thinking and going slow and making connections. All right, well, let's go to questions. What questions do you guys have? And you can go ahead and type that in the question box like you have been all along. And I appreciate your diligence here. And like Leanne said, we've had over 80% responses, which with well over 100 people. That's amazing. So I appreciate that.
Vernon, I have a few questions that have come in. Jan asked, each time she's attempted to unmute everyone with a group of 25 or less, she's had background interference, like arguing, baby crying, dog barking. Any advice?
Yeah, we had that. And in my home studio, my twins lived with us for 3 years, so I had 3-year-olds and 2-year-olds running around the house. So very important that you, and Laura, I'm going to ask you to jump in on this as well, but what we ask people to mute, and if you have, we have to ask them to self-select. So my preference is to have every line open. And it depends on what platform you're working in. If I see somebody's microphone vibrating while I'm talking and I hear stuff, I can mute them myself. I can mute them individually. And I'll just say, Mike, I heard some background noise from yours. I'm going to mute you, but just remember to unmute when you talk next. So do what the platform allows you to do. Try your hardest to keep the lines open. I don't like the blanket muting, but if you can mute selectively and ask people to selectively mute if they have background noises, to do exactly what you just said. Say, I understand that you're working from home, and there are all these other things going on. We get it. Just make sure you self-select on your mute. Laura, I'm going to throw it. Do you have anything to add to that?
I'm just going to just emphasize how important it is to try and keep people off mute. And I'll give you a real-world example. I just was doing a series of programs with IntelliPresence, which is one where we've got some visual capability. One of the remote groups was keeping themselves on mute, and it took a tremendous amount of work to keep them involved, because they were doing a lot of table talk. And it's a great way to get them to stay engaged. But you do have to be diligent about getting them to mute. You know, we've got a couple of other questions in here, Vernon, that I thought were important. Carol and several folks have asked about the use of a producer, and little different topic here. And in the virtual classroom, we feel fairly strongly that you need to use a producer if you can. One of the things that we talk about a lot is making the technology completely transparent and seamless for the participants, because it's not about the technology. It's about the engagement in the class. They're in a classroom, a small classroom. A producer can help you tremendously take away one of those balls that you have to juggle by dealing with problems with the telephone, problems with sign-on, making sure that if you lose connection, that your backup comes up so that you can continue the class seamlessly. We use producers in all of our programs, and it's been a real success factor that we see. Vernon, anything to add about producers?
I just think producers help you focus on the content and let the technology issues rest on the producer. I've talked to a lot of instructors that do both, and it's really distracting. And sometimes you just have to give the participant an 800 number to call, and they keep moving. So I think it's just more respectful, if possible, to use a producer. But we understand that sometimes budgeting just doesn't allow for that. We have written a paper on the use of producers and why it's important. So if you feel like you need to influence your company to do that, we can kind of help you do that if you just shoot us an email, and we'll give you our email address in a little bit. Any other questions, Laura?
We have another question about engaging participants that are not native English speakers or from cultures that do not embrace virtual learning. How do you engage those people? Diana asks us.
Laura, you're really good at that. You want to tackle that one?
I do, and Diana, that is one of the biggest challenges I know we find, depending on the culture, and I've done a tremendous amount of work in the Asia-Pac regions and in South Asia, and one of the things that I find is that having people verbally respond can be really, really difficult. This is where using alternate methods to get feedback are critical. Chat is your most important friend in that case, or a question manager in this case. Get them to be able to write down their feedback. And I have found that people are much more likely to do that. You could also do that in a virtual whiteboarding setting. And so that's a really challenging piece. You've got to build in a little more time into that, but use your same engagements. You'll use their name, you'll bring up their feedback in a way that really honors their participation. I've seen a big jump in participation when I've had them do breakouts where there's chat involved or being able to write down their answers.
Great, thank you, Laura. What other questions do you guys see?
I see several people have asked questions about the best practice for the length of the class.
I'll start with that, and then Laura, I'll throw it to you. We've seen a lot of stuff, guys. We've seen one instructor told me they had a 5-hour virtual they were doing. I was like, what? You're kidding me. I don't think people can stay engaged that long. What we've seen for our clients and for ourselves is that we look at 90 minutes to 2 hours, and you can stretch it to 2 hours and 30 minutes if you give a break. But anything over that I think is death, and you're not going to get the engagement. Now what we've done is we've had a 5-hour class, but we have 2.5 hours in the morning, then we give them a 3-hour break in the middle to get everything done, then they come back in the afternoon. So they have a full day and they can commit to a day. And that's a topic for another webinar, but getting people to commit to different times on a longer schedule is always challenging. Laura, what are your thoughts?
I went ahead and typed an answer into the question manager. Completely concur. I think the challenge for many of us is that we have curriculum that, as an instructional designer and as the chief instructional designer at Evoke, one of the challenges we have is, what if that curriculum is very long? And we need to break that up. So you may need to break it up into multiple modules that go over the course of, a couple of weeks or a couple of days. One of the things that we have done with success is done a teach piece that could be a very short period of time, let's say a 60-minute teach piece, and then have them take a break, be able to incorporate that information, and then come back in almost like a laboratory session in which you have a smaller group to make sure that the learning gets transferred and they get a chance to practice. So these are critically important questions to ask, and then really start with that good instructional design.
And I'll add to Laura's last piece about instructional design there. 90 minutes to 2 hours is ideal. Anything over 2 hours, 2 to 2.5 hours, you better be doing a lot of breakout activities where they're collaborating and talking with each other. It better not be you talking for 2.5 hours. The other time has to be involved for meaningful activities. I'm sure Laura would agree with that. I think that's what you meant by great design. What other questions are there? We have time probably for 1 or 2 more questions. Kim, are you saying anything?
I see a lot of people asking about recommendations for the best headset to have.
All right, well, I'll go first. And one of the things, we struggle with this a lot, and then I bought one, on Amazon, and I did all, this was like years ago, and then I had to send it back, but it wasn't the right one, and I had to pay the fee, and it was ridiculous. And Laura turned me on to this company called Hello Direct. And I love them because they have a plethora of choices, and they have people that can help you. And if you don't get the right one, you can send it back at no cost, all this stuff. What I have is a fantastic headset, and it's a Jabra GN9300E that switches, it's wireless, and it switches back and forth between telephone and VoIP by pressing a button. So I can use it with my hardline phone, or I can use it with my speaking through the computer. And it's on the $300 side, but if you're investing in this, and that it's a great thing. I'll tell you another reason why. The battery in the wireless headset lasts for 5 or 6 hours, where when I was using my phone early on in my career around this, your phone dies after 2 hours, and especially if you have a longer session, you have to recharge your phone and move to another phone. So that's what I would say. Jabra has some great ones, and I have the GN9300E. Laura, do you have one that you like?
I wrote into chat, everyone, by the way, we have no association with Hello Direct, is that Plantronics and Jabra really have been my mainstays. Do think about the use of that. Are you going to be calling in using regular landline telephony, or do you need a good voice over IP? Logitech makes a few, Sennheiser, and others. So you need to think about sometimes having multiple headsets. Vernon, I want to grab one last question as we go to a close. Carol asked a question I think is one that we struggle with. And Carol, I was right with you this week. How do you manage activities across the virtual classroom when people are in multiple locations? That's where finding a way to make sure you've got as many engagement tools, ways to connect with individual learners becomes critical. I had some folks in WebEx, I had folks sitting live in the classroom, and I also had people on telepresence. What I had to make sure is that not a single group felt like they were separated from the classroom. So that meant calling on them. And Vernon talked about taking notes. I made sure to take notes and jot down things that every location said so I could bring them in to the conversation, link one of the locations with another location. And that's a really important trick, Carol, that we've all, not even a trick, Carol, a great skill that we have to develop as instructors. And I think that's really the whole purpose of this webinar today. Thank you for that question.
And thank you, Laura, for answering that. Well, one of the things about a webinar and virtual is you got to start on time and end on time, because people have to go to their meetings and you have to go as well. So here's the thing, if you're interested in earning a virtual certificate, we do that. We have a virtual instructor certification. You can just shoot us an email at client.service@evokelearning.com. There's our 800 number there. You can give us a call. Also, we have a brief written for everything we talked about here. It's called Socializing the Virtual Classroom. It's like 7 pages, 7 or 8 pages. If you want it, write down that email address on the screen and just send us an email and say, send me the brief from the webinar. That's all you have to do. And we'll make sure within a day that gets to you. All right, so thank you so much for your attention today. Laura and Kim, thank you. Leanne, thank you. And Leanne, I'm going to throw it back to you. But remember, if you're interested in the certificate, give us a call. Leanne?
Thank you so much, everybody there from Evoke Learning, and thank you all for attending. At the end of the webinar, you'll be given an opportunity to fill out a survey before you leave. And I have recorded this webinar, and in a few days it'll be available on the training-pros.com website in our newsroom area, along with our other pre-recorded webinars that we've offered from the flipped classroom, MOOCs, and let the content choose your tool. So this is going to join that group of pre-recorded webinars that we have offered to our consultants and clients. Thank you all for attending, and have a great weekend.